Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to look at the Free5e Kickstarter. We're also going to look at the Alien RPG Kickstarter that's going on. Are there new minis for Sigil? We have a little bit of news about the 5.2 system reference document for D&D 2024. Memoirs of a Dracolich. I am going to talk about my experiences having run the CR17 Dracolich from the 2025 Monster Manual, what happened, and what ways would I modify it in the future. Today's tip is going to be slow, medium, and fast monster initiative. And we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. The Lazy RPG Talk Show is brought to you by the patrons of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, tools, a whole bunch of scenarios, a whole bunch of adventures, downloadable tools that you can run yourself to help you run your games, a whole separate podcast, access to our wonderful Lazy DM community over on Discord, and patrons support me directly in putting on shows like this. To the patrons of Sly Flourish, thank you so much for your outstanding support. My pal Dale over at Wormworks is doing Free5e, and it's a wonderful idea. The idea here is to take the various system reference documents that exist for 5e, which include the 5.1 SRD published by Wizards of the Coast, the Level Up Advanced 5e system reference document published by EN World Publishing, my own Lazy GM documents that I have released under the Creative Commons, and more, and put them together into a full role-playing system, a full 5e role-playing system. So if you actually look at the system reference documents, they are missing a lot of what you need to actually run the game if you were going to sit down and run the game. They don't have any of the instructions on how to do it. They don't have any advice on how to do it. It's just the rules. It's very, very basic because it's not intended to be a system. It's not intended that you take the SRD and you run games with them. They are intended to help publishers publish games with them. So what Dale is doing is he's taking these, he's putting these all together and then releasing all of it under a Creative Commons license. In other words, we will have a full version of 5e, a full RPG, not a system reference document, but a full RPG released under a Creative Commons license. Some of the advantages of that mean that it can be very easily transferred into different formats, both formats that make it easier for people to use, but also formats that make it far more accessible for people that are vision impaired, all different kinds of systems to make it easier for people who typically don't have good access to the materials that we do or have trouble with the kind of format that we're using for a lot of these material. They can convert it to those formats. And it can be done without any permission from anyone. You can just do it. You want to convert it to a different version, you can just convert it to a different version. You can grab the text and off you go. He is going to be releasing it under many of these versions, including Braille and Markdown and EPUB and Word documents and PDFs and everything else. And then also making versions that are locally printable. So across the world, the economy for individual countries can vary drastically. An example is a player's handbook in India costs about $500 US. That's kind of the equivalent. Imagine you went to a game shop and you wanted to play 5e, you want to play D&D 2024, and it cost you $1,500. That's sort of the way it is now in India. But if you are able to take the free version and print it at your local printer, you're paying the local costs for it, which could be significantly less because you're doing it local using your local economy rather than trying to print off of a Western economy in a country that doesn't sit on a Western system. So it makes the entire 5e system more accessible across the world in so many ways. So as a Kickstarter, though, it's a little weird because the way we're typically used to Kickstarters is you go to Kickstarter and you back the Kickstarter and you get the product. In this case, you are funding the development of a free product that's going to be given to everybody. So when you look at the actual rewards that you're getting, the rewards are not these books because everyone's going to get these books. Instead, it's things like dice trays, bookmarks, keychains, printable cards, pens, all different kinds of accessories that you can get that are really there to kind of remind you about why we love this game and what we love about this game. But you're already going to be getting access to the whole thing because everyone's getting access to the whole thing. So this is much more, instead of you sort of pre-purchasing a product, this actually gets far more like the original Kickstarter idea of like funding an idea, funding a human being to help them with an idea rather than buying a product. And the next Kickstarter we talk about in a minute here is definitely of the side of like buying a product. And that's how I do it too. I'm not bashing that that's the way it's done, but we are kind of used to a new model of Kickstarter, which is essentially like a pre-order campaign. And in some cases, like in the case of VN World, the product's already done. In my case, like the whole book was written and was already going through editing. I think we were a good chunk through editing, but I hadn't yet funded like art and getting everything else done. But a lot of times these projects, we've already spent tens of thousands of dollars on these products before they come out to Kickstarter. So it's almost like people are basically pre-ordering stuff. In this case, we're actually backing the idea. And the idea is making 5e accessible to everybody. You've heard me talk about 5e as a platform. You know, that 5e is no longer one single game system. 5e isn't just D&D. 5e is now a wide range of different stuff, and it's all an open platform. And this is an example of taking that and saying, here is the reference level version of 5e that still remains completely open in how we're using it. So I am biased because a lot of my material is in this book, but the material that is in this book is material that was taken from my system reference documents. I have been talking to Dale for a while about this. He convinced me to take parts of Fantastic Adventures, including the first sample adventure and the description of White Sparrow, so that there's actual like a playable town and a playable adventure, also released under a Creative Commons license, so that you can actually build off of them rather than not only can you take those adventures and copy them and move them wherever you want, send them to your friends or whatever, you can expand them yourself and you don't ever have to come to me for permission. And those are going to be in these books as well. So you can see what's going on here. You can find a link down in the show notes. This is definitely, I think, a really good cause. I know Dale. Dale's done a lot of other campaigns. His heart is in the right place. This is a fantastic way to support the RPG hobby, I think, and I'm a huge fan. So take a look. Link is down in the show notes for it, and you can take a look at the Free5e Kickstarter that is going on and help support a true open version of 5e. A true, when we say free, I mean free in a lot of different ways. Free is in you can go download them for free and use them, but free is also in you can take that material and you can build off of it. Other people can build off of it. People in other countries can build off of it and build their own product lines. It's a really great way to have this open so that no one group is in control of what this system can do. Fantastic, fantastic project. The Alien RPG certainly doesn't need my help. It is doing very well. $1.6 million on the new Alien RPG Evolved Edition. This is definitely, wow, I just watch it and the numbers are going up. 8,000 backers so far, 18 days to go. I haven't backed it yet. I'm probably going to back it, and I'm probably going to get the starter set because the starter set looks really cool. I like it a lot. And I think that like as RPGs go, Alien looks like a really fun RPG. I've got friends that have been playing it and really liked it. I think that from what I've heard, the system that they use is a really fun system. I have not played it myself, but I think it looks really cool. And obviously lots of people think it's really cool. So this is a whole new version of the Alien RPG available from Free League. Again, they're doing very, very well. And just in case you are interested, look at that starter set. Yeah, I got it. Look at all the stuff in there. I got to buy that. I'm going to back it. I'm definitely going to back it. I have two different accounts for back. Okay, I'm on my backer account. One of the things I don't like that Kickstarter does is Kickstarter will let followers of yours know what things you've backed. And I don't necessarily want to promote everything that I back because I back all kinds of stuff. So I don't want to say, if I'm going to promote it, I'm going to do what I'm doing right now, right? I'm going to talk about it on my show. I don't want my act of backing a Kickstarter to be promotion for that Kickstarter when I don't even know, you don't know why I backed it. I could be backing for $1 just because I want to watch the paint dry or I want to watch trains run into buildings. I don't know why I'm backing it. But in this case, I'm backing it. I'm telling you that I'm backing it. And I'm going to back the starter set. Yeah, so $30 for that starter set looks like a really good deal. So I'm going to pick that up. Yeah, I don't even know if I'm going to run it, but it looks really good. And I've heard great things about it. And I bet I'd have players that would have fun doing an Alien RPG. I don't know when I would run it, which is I typically don't want to buy a physical product, unless I'm pretty sure I'm going to run it. But this looks really good, and it looks like a good deal. So I'm gonna pick it up. New miniatures for Sigil. As I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, we found out that it was like 90% of the development team is like, I think 27 out of 30 members of the development team that were working on Sigil, the 3D virtual tabletop for D&D, were fired. Separated from the company, I think is how they said it. And then all of a sudden we start to see 3D miniatures like the Mimic being promoted for Sigil. Why? I don't understand. clearly the investment of that is no longer there. Why would you spend now? I know this kind of like I'm running my own. My wife and I run the Sly Flourish Empire, and we have a company. And one of the things we know about is that you have a marketing budget. The marketing budget isn't just money. It's sort of the how much marketing of what kind of things you want to do. If I blasted you with marketing all the time, you'd never follow me. You'd never want to hear anything I have to say. So we know that like we only have so much of your attention. And if we want to show you a new thing we've made, we want to focus that on the thing that we want you to get. Why would you focus on the thing that you just killed? Why would you spend your marketing capital here, your attention economy, showing off 3D miniatures for things that are already dead? I guess it's because they were done and you might as well put them out there, but do you really want anybody investing in Sigil, including like me, to go there and use Sigil? Would I want to do that? I don't understand. So that was really confusing. And then people brought up, hey, you now have the animal packs for Sigil. And by the way, they are quote unquote unpainted. Why are there unpainted? Why do you have unpainted miniatures? Is this to truly capture every aspect of your tabletop role-playing game, including the shame that you have of not having yet painted your miniatures and having to put a gray miniature on the table, breaking the illusion that your players have, disappointing your players with your lack of commitment for having not painted your minis? We want to capture that and put that in our 3D version as well, so that you are filled with the same shame of putting a gray unpainted miniature on your table. And then there's the big question, where's my gold dragon? If you recall, when the D&D 2024 books were on pre-order on D&D Beyond, one of the pre-order exclusives that you could get was a 3D model of a gold dragon that would be available to you in Sigil. And I remember many people, when they heard about Sigil's demise, cried out, where's your gold dragon? To which I will now apply that if Wizards of the Coast does not immediately release the ancient gold dragon in a downloadable, self-hostable Docker that I can then download and put on my Raspberry Pi so that I can open it up in my own local browser window without having to go to the man to be able to look at my gold dragon mini and just spin it around and look at it and examine it, then it will be an outrage. I'll be straight. I forgot to do that joke when Sigil was out. The idea that Wizards should immediately create a downloadable, self-hostable Docker installation so I can put my Gold Dragon mini on my Raspberry Pi. I forgot to do that joke. And I was sad that I forgot to do that joke. So I was very happy to see them put out advertisements for 3D minis for a platform that is now defunct, just so I could do that segment, just so I could do that joke. The answer is I don't really care about any of this. The answer is, I don't know. Is Sigil even up and running? I'm not sure. People can do it. But it cracked me. It cracked me up that they were marketing minis for a system where literally I could see in a little while, the ink hasn't dried yet on the news that 27 people lost their jobs. Andy Collins, who worked there twice, got fired twice. Sad, right? These are people's lives. And then they immediately put up an ad for, we still have this Mimic mini. You're like, for what? Why are you doing this? And then I love the unpainted miniatures. That just cracked me up. And then I got the opportunity. So thank you. I'm sorry you had to listen to that. But I thought my joke about a self-hostable, downloadable Docker for your Gold Dragon mini so that you could self-host it on your own Raspberry Pi. More a joke about me, by the way, than a joke about them. I don't really want that. I'm good. Thank you. I thought that was funny. So thank you for putting up with my super long joke. But let's talk about something that I do think matters. And that is whether or not we're going to see a 5.2 SRD. The good news is, this is really the news. You want the news? This is the news. The news is that over on the D&D Beyond forum, you can find a link if you want to see it. There was a conversation about the 5.2 SRD. 5.2 SRD is the system reference document published by Wizards of the Coast that will cover the new rules for D&D 2024. What it's going to have in it, we don't know. Is it going to be as expansive as the original one was? We can hope so. I would assume so, but we'll see. But mostly, when is it coming? And the answer is we don't know. And the answer is it doesn't sound like they really know either. They had mentioned, quote unquote, weeks. And then people are saying, it's been weeks. Where is it? Right? I said it on the show last week. So people have been talking about on D&D Beyond. I guess there's been a couple of YouTube videos where people have been talking about it as well. But Latia, who is the community manager for D&D, a Wizards of the Coast employee, had this quote, which I think is important, that said, that being said, and I'm taking one part of a quote where she was mostly talking about what weeks means. And I don't think we need to get in the conversation of weeks and baby weeks. Oh, it could be 752 weeks. It's still weeks, right? 752 weeks are still a number of weeks. We didn't say 2 weeks. Right? I don't think that's the important part. The important part is this. That being said, though we are still on track to release within weeks of the Monster Manual, there is much work being done to make sure the SRD is just the right for the community, and you will get to see it soon. They are still committing to releasing the 5.2 SRD. That to me is the news, right? Do I need it like right now? No. The urgency for this is Wizards has a tendency of sometimes changing their minds and they shift direction, and I don't want them to shift direction before they commit to the thing that they said they were going to do. So I am looking forward to it, and I am glad to hear. I had heard this as well. I had heard from other folks that they really are interested in putting out the 5.2 SRD. I had mentioned this last time too when I brought it up, that it is definitely in Wizards' interest to put out a 5.2 SRD because they want people to develop for D&D 2024 because they want more material. They clearly are interested in third-party material for D&D 2024 and 2014 because they continue to publish it on D&D Beyond. So if they put out the 5.2 SRD, more people can publish material that is directly compatible with D&D 2024 and using the same stylings as D&D 2024, then they can pick the winners and then bring them into D&D Beyond. That is definitely in their best interest. In our interest, it's good because it means another great big rule set that's 5e compatible that will be open in the Creative Commons that we can use to make all different kinds of things. So it's valuable, I think, to everybody. How does it matter for DMs? I've heard some people saying, like, I don't care. Why does a 5.2 SRD matter to me as a DM? It matters to you because you are going to see more material that you can use in your games. You're going to see more tools that are available to use in your games. As soon as this stuff is out in the open, essentially what this is, when you look at what a 5.2 SRD is, and there's still people that argue about whether you need one at all, and it's a reasonable argument. But the one part about it is if they release it, you know that they know that they've released it. So you know that they're not going to come after you if you use lingo that sounds like something that you would have found in D&D 2024. There are a lot of publishers, and I've talked to many of them, who are worried about getting smushed by Wizards of the Coast if they go too far. Well, in this case, if they publish this, you know what they're saying. Look, we're not going to go after you if you go for stuff like this. It becomes it becomes a written agreement saying, this is the stuff we are saying you can do whatever you want with. You can build tools around it. You can convert it into different formats. You can send it around to players so they have lots of material without having to buy anything. You can build products off of it. You can take pieces of it and use it however you want. There's a lot of advantages, and a lot of those advantages directly impact DMs because you get better tools. You get tools from different providers. You get a PDF that you can send to your players so that they don't have to download anything at all. You can get it in different formats. You can get it in Markdown to stick in your notes. You can get it in all different kinds of ways. And that comes from these system reference documents. So it is definitely a good thing for us. It is also definitely a good thing for Wizards of the Coast. I presume they're very interested in it. And I'll be honest, like I am in the thing, like any day I feel like we're going to see it. And maybe I'm wrong. Here's the one you can mark me on. I'm not going to pick a date. I think I have a bet on the Sly Flourish Discord server that'll be out, I think, by June. But I would, I'm waiting around. I expect that any one day we're going to see a thing come up. But it's a big deal. Think about it from their side on this. And one of the things is if they release it, it's done. If you recall, they had released the old one and they included some proper names of characters from intellectual property that they didn't really want to release, and they ended up in the system reference document by accident, almost certainly. So they want to be careful about what they are putting in there, because once you put it, and I know this because I put out stuff in the Creative Commons, I double and triple check the stuff that I put out because I want to be absolutely sure the stuff I'm putting out is out there and I can never take it back again. I can never edit it and go, oh no, that was something I didn't want to give away. Once it's in there forever. So obviously it makes sense that they're going to take time to work on it, but I really hope to see it soon. But I'm glad to hear the main thing about this that I think is a good deal is they are still doing it. This past week, I ran the CR17 Dracolich from the D&D 2025 Monster Manual. And I wanted to offer some notes. I'm calling it Memoirs of a Dracolich. I ran the Dracolich and I wanted to talk about it. So the Dracolich is a CR17 monster. I ran it against 5 10th level characters. Now, according to my own encounter building guidelines, that would be above deadly, because a single monster could potentially be deadly if its challenge rating is higher than 150% of the average character level, according to my lazy encounter benchmark. I also measured it using the encounter building guidelines for the D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. And what I learned from that is that it is also above deadly. So this was not a fair fight. The Dracolich against 5 10th level characters was not a fair fight. 12th level characters it would have been. 11th, almost. 10th, it's a little powerful. But I was like, the characters are powerful. These are smart players. Everything will be fine. Wow, was it hardcore. So I will say this. So far, running higher challenge rating monsters from the D&D 2025 Monster Manual, boy, do they hit hard. So I gave a lot of criticism for many years about the D&D 2014 Monster Manual monsters not hitting at their appropriate challenge rating, particularly at higher challenge levels. I do not have that concern anymore. And the funny thing is now my concern kind of goes a little bit in the other direction, and I'm going to talk about why. There were 2 things with this Dracolich that made it particularly deadly. And the first one will surprise you. It was its initiative. So I love that the 2025 Monster Manual now includes static initiative in the box, that it tells you instead it has initiative of plus 12 with a parentheses that says 22. What's interesting is why that one's plus 12 and 22, and then hit points are static, but then the dice equation is the optional. So that's funny, but whatever. But 22 for initiative is really high. And when I ran it, it went before all of the players did. And what this meant was the players all walked into the room, the Dracolich won the initiative, and it blasted them with its necrotic breath. The necrotic breath is a DC 20 Constitution saving throw for 52 necrotic damage, save for half. 4 of the 5 characters failed their save and took 52 damage, and 1 of the 5 made their save, taking 26. That was a total of 234 points of damage on turn 1 of round 1. The very first thing that happened was all of the characters took 234 damage, and they had no ability to do anything about it. There was no opportunity to move, no opportunity to kind of cast a spell to help protect against it. They just immediately took 234 collective damage on turn 1. That changed the battle. And honestly, immediately upon taking that, I went, oh my God, am I just going to TPK them? Because he hadn't even done his legendary actions yet. And his legendary action is pounce and rend and pounce and rend and pounce and rend, which means he does an additional 22, so 66 damage on top of the 234, closing in, I think, hitting exactly 300 damage on round 1. 300 damage at CR 17. That is, let's just do some math here. 300 divided by 17. That's 17.6 damage per challenge rating. My benchmark is 7 per challenge rating. And now that's circumstance. But the Dracolich is particularly set up to inflict that kind of circumstance, and that's because its initiative is so high. So that's the first lesson, is like keep track of that initiative. And I honestly would change it. And I'm going to talk after this about an idea I have for slow, medium, and fast monsters for initiative. Instead of using the initiative bonuses that exist inside monsters or even static initiative, that you can instead decide when monsters should go based on the story that they've got or the circumstances and drop them in at 3 different levels. I would have done this for this. I think a Dracolich having an initiative of 15 would have been fine. But for legendary monsters, it doesn't matter what their initiative is because they get legendary actions, which means he could have started pouncing and rending right away anyway. He didn't need an initiative of 22. And I would rather him be lower in the initiative order and do those legendary actions first and then set up and then breathe. And then the characters have an opportunity to run around, scramble around, do stuff. And hopefully you don't hit all 5 of them. You may still, because he could fly up and he could blast, but he could also get pinned down by a melee person with opportunity attacks or something like that. So, that blast is, that is a big deal. Now, I was going to give you a secret. I'm actually a pretty bad GM in one particular area, which is I forget to read the stat block for things. And I either selectively forgot or actually forgot to read about his life suppression ability. Life suppression is creatures within 60 feet of the Dracolich can't regain hit points. 60 feet. That is a huge, that's 12 squares out from the dragon. The dragon is already 4 squares. So that is a huge range on the dragon's ability to stop healing. If I had used that, I'd have TPK'd those guys. Absolutely. I am confident. If they had no ability to heal, and it's so easy to move the Dracolich around the area and make sure that no one in it can heal. And 60 feet is so big that it takes at least 2 rounds for a character to get outside of it to be able to heal. And your healer needs to be outside of it. I guess the healer, that's not true. The healer can still be inside of it and cast spells, but the person getting healed has to be outside of it. Now, that's not a bad strategy. That's actually kind of cool, but it's so big and it's so much. So the second thing I would offer of running the Dracolich is instead of a 60-foot no heal, I would turn it into a 30-foot half heal. That's still tactically interesting. It still means that characters have to move around to decide how they're going to get healed. They still get a little bit of healing, but they'll get so little that the amount of damage the Dracolich does is just going to chew right through it again anyway. So you're really only getting enough healing to like get back on your feet, but you're not going to survive a hit unless you manage to get outside of the area, and then you can take a big heal and actually get enough hit points to heal. But I think that 60 foot was too big. So those are the 2 immediate things that caught my attention. Was the initiative, having an static initiative so high that he goes first is really not only unfair to the players, but kind of boring too, because they don't even get a chance to do anything. You're really kind of taking agency away by blasting them with 234 points of damage without them being able to do anything at all. Hitting them with 234 when they've had an opportunity to move around a little bit and you can kind of escape. Now they're ready for it. But just hitting them right away with 234, I know looking across the table at them, they just felt defeated. They were like, oh, why? Right? Like, it was kind of lame. So I really think that like even having the Dracolich go on a 10 and then bounce around and pounce and do some other things, do terrifying presence, and then hit him with a breath is a far more interesting pacing to the game. I don't mind doing the 234. I think you should do 234 after the characters have moved around a bit. All right, I think that changes the pacing of the game and can make it far more interesting. So that and the life suppression, I think the life suppression is really, really rough. And if you stack it with everything else it's got, you could totally TPK a party, I think. Turning that into a 30-foot diameter or 30-foot radius that halves the amount of healing you can do. If you want to be hardcore, you could still have it only not allow people to heal within that area. That's really tough. And you're in serious danger. Now, one other funny thing, though, is its hit points is actually pretty low. 225 hit points is CR 17. Is below 15 per CR. 15 to 20 CR is my general idea for how many hit points a monster should have. 225 is actually pretty low. And I actually beat it up to 300, but I also put other creatures on the map that, when they were defeated, did 50 damage to the Dracolich. So they had ways to kind of chew through its hit points faster by hitting other guys in the battle that I ran. So, of course, you can sort of move that 225 up and down depending on if you want. 225 might be good. You could say, like, is it a glass cannon? Like maybe it's 225, but it's only going to last a couple of rounds. And it's only going to last a couple of rounds is good because no one can heal, right? So everybody's getting down. So perhaps like if you look at it as exact design, maybe that's exactly how the design is going to work. However, I do feel like for me, I would rather have the battle be a bit more epic than fast and give it more hit points, a lower initiative, and limit the ability of that life suppression. Otherwise, holy cow, did that thing hit hard. So I just wanted to offer up some of those thoughts for running the Dracolich. I will probably do this with other D&D 2025 monsters, sort of probably big monsters as I run them. Now, my 2025 mix game where we're running A5e, D&D 2024, and D&D 2014, and we have all characters from all those sets in this game, I'm running many more monsters at higher levels and higher tier. They just hit level 11, so they're going to start to hit a lot of tier 3 sort of monsters. I will be more experiences like this as we go. I actually think there's a new way that we can treat initiative for monsters that I'm going to try out more, but I wanted to share it here and get your thoughts on it and see if it was something you wanted to try at your table and we see how it goes. And that idea is this concept called slow, medium, and fast initiative. So instead of having monsters roll for initiative, you instead look at the monster and look at the circumstance and decide, do they go slowly, medium, or fast? Are they kind of on the average? Are they slow? Or are they fast? And I treat this as 10, 15, and 20. So a slow monster would be a initiative of 10. A medium monster would be initiative of 15, and a fast monster would be initiative of 20. And you can decide which initiative they move on. Maybe you want to change that DC a bit. You could go 5, 10, and 15 if you wanted. So, or you could even do 5, 10, 15, and 20, have a very fast. So slow would be DC 5, medium would be DC 10, fast would be DC 15, and very fast would be DC 20. And what it lets you do is it lets you space monsters out in the initiative order. You don't have to roll, and it treats it like a difficulty class. It actually treats it like the characters are doing an ability check rather than rolling initiative. It's like they're beating an initiative. If they're beating a DC, if they beat that DC, they go ahead of it. If they don't beat the DC, they go after it. It actually reminds me a bit of the initiative from Shadow of the Demon Lord. Shadow of the Demon Lord had fast turns and slow turns. They changed this in Shadow of the Weird Wizard. Robert Schwab changed this in Shadow of the Weird Wizard. But it was an interesting idea that essentially, do you want characters to do less stuff quickly or more stuff but take longer? And in this circumstance, you instead have this base DC and it works. I've had a joke for a long time. Not really a joke. I've actually done this, but my players all knew it, that all the monsters always went on DC 12. I just picked DC 12 and that was my default. I would say DC 12 and they would pick it. That works really well. It gives a little bit of an edge to the monsters, right? It makes them a little bit higher. But you could just as easily say DC 10 and it wouldn't be a big deal. And if that's your medium initiative, you say most monsters go on DC 10. Some people go before. But I have a feeling, because a lot of people take dexterity, a lot of people have other kind of bonuses to initiative, that if you make DC 10 the medium, that a lot of people are going to beat it most of the time. That you're going to have players go a lot. 15 feels a little high to me, but you could kind of probably say, if you were doing a harder game, you could have monsters that tend to go ahead a little bit more often by having them go on at 15. I've kind of split the differences to DC 12, but I want to try this one a little bit more of having the slow, medium, fast initiatives. And I don't know if I'm going to do 5, 10, 15, 20. I don't know if I'm going to default to 15. A lot of DCs in D&D 2024 for everything kind of default to 15. So maybe I'll just try 15 and see how it goes and say a DC 15 is the medium. And, that means the monsters are going to go in the middle of the pack most of the time, which is really where I want them, right? I typically want some characters to go, then the monsters go, then some characters go. That's sort of the pacing I want. So I'm trying to drop it in the middle, which is why 12 has worked out so well for me. Maybe I'll just stick to 12. I don't know. But I wanted to offer that up because I think it's a really interesting way to kind of think about monsters, look at them and say, this is a zombie. They're slow. They go on 5. Oh, this is like a quickling assassin. They go super fast. They go on 20. And you could just pick that 5, 10, 15, 20, and you pick where they go, kind of defaulting to 10, maybe defaulting to 15. Maybe you pick a number like 12 and decide for yourself. But I wanted to offer that up as a trick because I think it is a really fun way to go. Let's cover more patron questions. Every quarter on the Sly Flourish Patreon, I post a new thread. We have one coming up here pretty soon. When we go to April, we're going to do our second quarter Patreon Q&A. But patrons can ask questions all throughout the month, all throughout the quarter. And I answer every question every Friday. I go through all the questions that came up during the week and answer them every Friday on the Patreon. Some of those questions I bring here so we can discuss them further on this show. James says, I play online a bit as a player in one-shots. The DMs are typically fine, but many times the players drag the game, such as metagaming or telling other players what to do. What can I do in-game as a player or as a DM? And when I DM a one-shot with strangers, how do I mitigate? I'm adding some words. How do I mitigate that when I'm acting either as a DM or a player? The first thing I would recommend is that Ginny D, this is a particular issue for online gaming that's different than in-person gaming. And it has a lot to do with how conversations take place online versus in person. In person, we can have side conversations that don't completely eat up a table. If two people are whispering to each other or pointing, that's not going to distract from everybody else. Our ears are able to kind of pick up these things. Too much of it, though, too much table chatter can be really grating for people. And you could say like, hey, can you guys hold it a sec? Let's have this conversation over here. But generally, there's no lag. Like there's no input lag. You don't have people talking over one another. You don't have like different microphones at different audio levels. You have body language, better body language so that you can see among each other. So there's a lot of advantages to in-person games when it comes to cross-chat and cross-chatter and things like that. But in online games, it's a far bigger problem. A lot of us who played over Discord or a lot of us who had like online meetings and stuff, we learned about like keeping your mouth shut when other people are talking, and we learned about the lag. And there's certain behaviors, but unfortunately, one of those big behaviors is we all tend to shut up. That those who are paying attention don't say anything because we know that if we talk over somebody else, we're going to interrupt them. So we try to wait until we have that opportunity or until we're called upon. Ginny D has a wonderful video where she talked about this. Her title was Online D&D Sucks. The better title was How to Make Online D&D Suck Less. She published this 4 years ago, I think it was right in the height of COVID, where she offers very good practical tips. So I would highly recommend this video. Very good practical tips for working with your other players, for having like physical signals that say it's your turn to talk, other ways to kind of make sure that you're talking to the group so they're aware of this, all this kind of stuff. So when you're a player in a game, you can talk to the GM and say, hey, I'm having a really hard time because we have people talking over. Would you be willing to implement some suggestions like these and offer some suggestions? Some things you can do are like have a text chat where if somebody needs to talk, or talk on the side, they talk in the text chat rather than in the main chat. Asking the DM to call on particular players rather than opening up a conversation to a whole group. Having some time at the beginning of the game, before the game begins, to have some regular chatter about life events and things like that. So any out of game talk can happen then. Taking a break during the game, having a 10-minute break and letting people chat during that 10-minute break can be very valuable as well. So giving them those like pressure valves where they want to talk, particularly because we're doing this for a social experience. We want to be able to talk. Having those breaks can really matter. Then having other kinds of signals or ways to like raise your hand. A lot of people swear by being on camera so that you can see some kind of body language with people to know when it's their turn. If you don't have that, or not everybody's on a camera, having some other, like a text chat where somebody can jump in and say, hey, I have something I want to bring up here, stuff like that. And then I implemented like pause for a minute. Pause for a minute is my way to say like, hey, pause for a minute. I have an issue. Can we talk about this issue? And that everybody else should be quiet when you bring up the issue, and then you can talk about it after it goes on. So there's a lot of tricks like that. But mostly I would recommend taking a look at Ginny D's video. It's a fantastic video. It got almost 500,000 views, and it's a really, really good source. Delaney says, now that you've spent time with all three, if you had to pick one, knowing that all three have their pros and cons, which would you choose? The D&D 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, the D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, Level Up Advanced 5e's Trials and Treasure, or the Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide. So this is a really hard question for me, but I'm going to answer it. And the answer is probably the Level Up Advanced 5e Trials and Treasure Guide. I feel like that book in particular has the most stuff, the most table usable stuff that I will reference over and over again. But it is really close with the Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide. And I think that either of those books do a good job. Each book has something the other book doesn't have. So neither of them are truly complete. I will say that at this point, you're asking me, and it's my own opinion. This is just like my opinion, man. And just like my opinion, man, is that both of those books are better than the D&D 2014 and D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. I think the D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide does an excellent job of walking new game masters through the process of being a game master. I like the rules references a lot. There's a lot I like in there. There's some advice I bristle on, but everybody's got something they don't like. And there's sections of the book that I think they didn't really have to spend the time on. I could have better spent time on other things. But I do feel like they're missing a lot of stuff. In particular, there's no random encounter tables in either the 2014 or 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. The D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide lacks a lot of random dungeon filler material, and I really find that material useful for helping me improvise locations when the characters are traveling through like dungeons or caverns or whatever. Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide has an excellent section for that, and the Trials and Treasure Guide does not. So when I said that like I like the A5e Trials and Treasure Guide, I do, but it's missing things like a random dungeon generator. They have a whole other book, I have it around here somewhere, for building out dungeons with random tables and stuff like that, but that's a separate book, and you didn't ask me about separate books, you asked me about these particular Game Master's Guides. The Trials and Treasure Guide has wonderful exploration, wonderful and detailed exploration rules, lots of like cool things that the characters might run into on their journeys, a much better journey system than any of the other books, and really good random encounter tables, and a really good treasure system and magic items in that book. It is a very, very good book. The Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide doesn't have a treasure section. It doesn't have a magic item section, or it has a very limited one, because the player's guide has that. So that's why I'm saying like these, in some way, we're kind of comparing apples to oranges. The Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide, though, has much better optional rules for lots of different circumstances. And a lot of it, they're big chunks of that book that I wrote that I'm very proud of. So you can tell, like if I'm saying the A5e Trials and Treasure book is probably the better of the two books as a Game Master's Guide for something that you're going to regularly use, it hurts me to say that because the Game Master's Guide for Tales of the Valiant has lots of stuff. That said, I am running a Tales of the Valiant game, and I use the Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide, and it works just fine. It's a very, very good book. So it's very hard for me to say, and I would say the two of them are really, really close. The one thing that sort of edges up Trials and Treasure above is the very good detailed exploration system that they have in there. And I think a better random treasure tables, random treasure options in Trials and Treasure than the Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide have. But it hurts me to say that. Delaney, you have brought me pain. Mike L says, in combat, how do you motivate or give options to PCs built around ranged weapon attacking to do something other than stay put and shoot? There is a carrot and stick approach to this. The carrot is make interesting areas for them to move to that offer them a better spot than hugging the doorway. Hugging the doorway is a major problem in encounters in D20 games in general, certainly in 5e games that I've run, where the characters open a door and they just stay in that doorway and they just fire and they duck out and they fire and they stay in the hall, and that way they can't. And you have to do something. I literally sometimes just say the hallway is filling with fire. Like, you're going to burn to death if you stay in this hallway. You're going to have to run in that room. Sometimes I'll just literally move their minis in the room. Like, I'll just shove them in, and be like, you got to move around. But there's carrots and sticks. And the carrots can be put positions out there that they want to get to that are better than hugging the doorway, like high ground where they can get it. If they can get there, and it might take them a round or two to get there, but if they can get up there, they get advantage on their attacks while they're on the high ground above targets that are in another area. That's a really extreme one because you're going to give advantage on all attacks. But you might say it's hard. You got to get over to it, which is far away. You have to climb it, which requires a check. So maybe it takes them a couple of rounds to get there, but if they get there in a couple of rounds, then they can just pepper people with arrows, right? You can do like arcane circles, where if you're in this arcane circle, even if you're not an arcane class, you can do an extra D6 force damage on your ranged attacks if you go over there. So then you kind of move them in the room with these like, oh, I want to get over these spots. For rogues or rangers who are sneaking around, cover, it works really well. You can set up positions of cover so that like, oh, it's way better if I'm over there, then I'm less likely to get hit by fireballs or I got an advantage on my dexterity checks or whatever, or I have cover, which is going to make it easier for me to shoot. So finding terrain elements that are advantageous to them is a good one. And then there's the stick. And the stick is, you're all going to get fireballed if you sit in that corner, right? Like you're going to get hit with area attacks. So they're all going to go, spread out, get away. So they all kind of move away in order to not get hit by big area attacks. You could also have I love donut auras. Donut aura is a thing that I don't know if I invented. I'm sure somebody else did, but I give it the name donut aura, and I'm pretty sure I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. And I first figured this out designing a 4th edition, the hardest officially published 4th edition monster published by Wizards of the Coast was Cryonax, a level 35 solo monster that right at the end of the 4th edition days. And I gave Cryonax a donut aura. And the donut aura was essentially an aura that surrounded him, where if you were outside of the aura, you were going to die. You were going to get shredded by black ice. He had this unholy ice that was whirling around like a storm around him. And you had to get into the eye of the storm so as not to get wrecked by the donut aura. And I think it had a 20-foot or I think it was a 10 square range. So you had to be within 10 squares of him. And then when he got bloodied, it turned into 5 squares, and 5 squares was within the range of his attacks, which meant by halfway through the fight, he would be able to hit you with melee attacks, or you would get shredded by his crazy donut aura. So if you can find an in-world way to create a donut aura, like my Dracolich fight this past week, I said there were 3 hags that had cursed the Dracolich to make him a Dracolich. It was a silver dragon that got converted into Dracolich. It got converted to a Dracolich by these 3 hags. I'm trying to be as fast as possible talking about this story. And the hags were tapping into energy from other worlds, 3 other worlds. And when they were destroyed, before they fought the Dracolich, they were actually resurrected at the Dracolich and they had to fight him again. But the walls were crumbling in and tendrils from other worlds, fiery tendrils and weird things were coming out, which meant the hallways and everything behind them were impossible. You would get shredded and killed and grabbed by tentacles and it would be really bad. And I just had to describe that. And the players all rolled their eyes at me and then ran into the room, but they knew this is Mike's donut aura, so that we have to go into the room. So it doesn't matter. They have mechanics, I have mechanics. And but I came up with a story reason why the whole rest of the realm. And then it was it was really collapsed and they were stuck in this chamber, but luckily they had a way to teleport out. So they were okay. So hopefully that helps. Bravo T says, you recently mentioned that you would soon be taking the opportunity to play quite a bit of D&D 2024. I wanted to see if you'd run into any trouble with the new hide action during play. I have not, but I do recognize that people have. Merric Blackman wrote on his blog, Merric's Musings, about the difficulty of the stealth rules in D&D 2024, and that as written, they kind of fall apart. And the idea, a lot of it has to do with the use of the word invisibility, that it kind of creates invisibility, and it has things like in order to have the invisible condition, you cannot be seen. But if you're behind 3/4 cover, that means you can be seen. So, there's like contradictory guidance in the rules for how it works. Justin Alexander. So if you want to read, I'm going to link to it in the show notes because I didn't do like a detail. I'm not like a super rules nerd. So I would recommend taking a look at Merric's explanation for exactly what's wrong with the rules in the book. He's correct. They are wrong. They just have these weird things going on. Justin Alexander wrote an article where he offers his house rule version of how to deal with this, which I think works very well. He has kind of very straight. And this is pretty much what I've been doing. There's a bit of like what the intention is, what you think the intention is versus like what the rules specifically say. Right. And so Justin Alexander's version of it is you take the hide action. With the hide action, you try to prevent people from knowing where you are. This is his replacement for the hide action. With hide action, you try to prevent people from knowing where you are or possibly that you're there at all. To do so, you must be in a concealable location, such as being behind heavily obscured 3/4 cover or total cover, or otherwise out of the observer's line of sight. When attempting to hide, you make a DC 15 dexterity stealth check. On a successful check, you gain the hidden condition against all observers with a passive wisdom score lower than your check. If any new observers enter the area, you also gain the hidden condition against them if their passive wisdom perception check is scored or lower. When an observer takes the search action, this is people trying to find him, they can immediately attempt a wisdom perception check against the DC set by the hidden character's dexterity stealth check. You lose the benefits of the hidden condition against any creature who succeeds at the wisdom perception check or who can otherwise see you because they're on the same side of the wall or you're hiding behind due to a magical effect, for example. Observers remain aware of where they last saw you or detected you. Hidden is a condition. When you have the hidden condition, you experience the following effects. When you're hidden from a creature, they don't know your location. If you are no longer in a concealable location or benefiting from another condition that allows you to take the hide action, you immediately lose the hidden condition. Concealed. You can't be affected by any effect that requires this target to be seen if you are hidden from the effect's creator. Surprise. If you are hidden from all enemies when you roll initiative, you have advantage on the roll. Combat advantage. Attack rolls against a hidden opponent have disadvantage, and a hidden opponent attack rolls have advantage. Detectable actions. If you make an attack or some other loud or overt action, such as talking louder than a whisper, kicking open a door, casting a spell with a verbal component, other creatures will pinpoint your current location, allowing them to, for example, aim attacks at you, although you would still have the benefit of your combat advantage. In addition, taking a detectable action allows any observer you're currently hidden from to make a wisdom perception check to spot you, removing the benefits of the hidden condition. Observers can use a reaction to gain advantage on this check. That's a little weird. Some of that is extra stuff, being able to take the advantage and stuff like that. Leaving concealment. If you are no longer in a concealable location or benefiting from another location, a condition or effect that allows you to take this action, you lose the hidden condition. If this happens on your turn in combat, you lose the hidden condition at the end of your turn. There's an important reason there. If, after being revealed, you take the hide action again, you can immediately regain the hidden condition after losing it, but observers will remain aware of where they last saw you or detected you. If you ready an action triggered by something that would reveal your location, you lose the hidden condition at the end of your readied action. For example, if you hide behind a closed door and stab someone that come in, you lose it after you go. And then he has modifications for the invisible condition as well. So you can see all that below. There was some issue with the 2024 guidance throwing the word invisible in there, but then having conditions where invisible wouldn't work. And I think that's where the issue goes. The intention really is, and it's mostly like when you think about rogues should be able to take their cunning action, which allows them to hide, and then use that to hide from somebody in order to attack them. Most people don't have any problem with them being able to do so with ranged attacks, but some people say that if you go behind 3/4 cover and you attempt to hide and succeed, but then you leave the cover to go stab somebody, as soon as you step out from behind the cover, they're going to see you. And then you won't be hidden anymore. What Justin says is like, if you had the hide action, you have it until the end of your turn, even if you leave that cover. And that's not a bad way to go, because I don't think we want the hide action to only work for ranged attacks. I think you want rogues to be able to run up and attack. One of my little house rules has been, if you're going in if you take the hide action and then run up behind a target that is engaged with one of your friends, they're not going to see you. I've actually added facing rules, and facing rules is weird. But if there's a guy and he's standing there as a veteran, standing in a room, looking around, and you're behind a rock wall that's 3/4 cover, and you hide, you should not be able to come around that rock wall, run up and stab him while he hasn't done anything yet, right? He's going to see you coming at him, right? Now, maybe if he's sitting in a chair with his back facing to you, it's a different story. But if he's facing you and he's ready, I don't think you should be able to run up and stab him. But if you have a friend of yours who's attacking him, now he's distracted. So I'm adding a distracted condition. And then he runs up and attacks. I play a lot of it by ear, and I try to play it by intention. And I think that we can work with our players to come up with how it works. I think the only main difference in D&D 2024 is that they have to succeed in a DC 15 to do it at all, which is a little weird because people's passive perceptions is well under that most of the time. So it makes it a little harder to sneak than it used to because you have to beat that DC 15. Anyway, if you want 2 articles that tell you more about what the problem is and a possible solution, take a look at Merric's musings. I will link to that in the show notes and to the Alexandrian where they both talk about these things. And I think they have pretty good approaches. There's also a thread on EN World that's got like 1 million posts where people talk all about it. But I think the main thing is talk to your players, come up with something that works for you. Don't be too specific about the rules. Don't try to hang on to the rules in the book too tightly, and instead think about what's important and think about what matters. I think it is a problem though for DMs if they want to limit, they feel like hiding is too overpowered. And they limit it when really, the fact that you can hide as a bonus action is there for a reason. And as the expectation is you should be able to do it in combat. So you don't want to necessarily take a rogue's ability to hide in combat away because you've determined, well, you left cover and therefore you're visible again. So that's the main thing that I would consider. Ken W. says, is there a way to use Forge of Foes for Shadowdark? I improvise all the time and sometimes for combat encounters. I like using Forge of Foes for my D&D 5e games, but struggle with Shadowdark to do the same. I usually end up reskinning 5 to 6 regular Shadowdark monsters I keep on hand. My player characters are getting into higher levels and I find it harder to improvise monsters. Any thoughts on what I can do? So reskinning is of course a very valuable trick. How good Forge of Foes? Forge of Foes would offer you lots of interesting advice for running monsters and thinking about monsters, but a lot of the mechanics that are inside Forge of Foes are built for 5e. So I don't think it's going to be as useful for a Shadowdark game. Matt Dietrich wrote up some Shadowdark, a 1-page downloadable name your price guide for building quick stats for Shadowdark monsters. It is on itch.io. I will link to it in the show notes. It is an excellent, if you're looking for like a 1-page guide that you can just take level 1 to 30. I don't know why the hell you need a level 30 at Shadowdark. Holy cow. 20 levels above the character's max level. That's pretty crazy. And then there's, of course, Creating Modders for Shadowdark, which is a Kickstarter. This was done by Michael Putlak, who I think works for Arcane Library as well, put together a mini bestiary with monster building guidelines in it. And it was just released. I just got the PDF for it. I don't know if it's available for purchase yet. If it is, I will find a link down in the show. I will add a link down into the show notes. But it is a really good guide. This is really the Forge of Foes for Shadowdark. You know, that's, in my opinion, this is the Forge of Foes for Shadowdark. So I would recommend both of those. I will link to both of those down in the show notes. They are both some excellent, excellent guides. John F. says, I love the concept of the deadly encounter benchmark. I have a concern, though. That formula was created taking into consideration PCs and monsters from D&D 5e 2014. I'm switching to Tales of the Valiant, and I wonder if the same formula applies in this environment. So, my question is the benchmark formula the same, taking into consideration that Tales of the Valiant monsters hit harder and TOV characters are a bit tougher? Yes, the answer is it works fine. And not only that, but that is the default rules for Tales of the Valiant, because I had the very awesome opportunity to work with the design team of Tales of the Valiant. And if you look at the Tales of the Valiant encounter building guidelines that are in the Monster Vault, and also there are versions of it that are in the Gamemaster's Guide, they are in fact the lazy encounter benchmark. They fit the same thing. It's the same design, same idea. And that is because, yes, monsters hit harder, but characters are more powerful at the same time. The thing to remember, and so that for Tales of the Valiant, the answer is you can use the Tales of the Valiant guidance because it's the same thing as the lazy encounter benchmark, and it's right in there, and it's right there in the book. You're playing rules as written if you're using the lazy encounter benchmark for Tales of the Valiant. But let's talk about mixing and matching your various 5e systems: D&D 2024, Tales of the Valiant, Level Up Advanced 5e, D&D 2014. The encounter building, in my opinion, and there's a little bit of differences here and there, but generally speaking, in my opinion, the lazy encounter benchmark works fine for all of those systems, and it works well against the mix. There's one particular thing you need to keep in mind, though, which every time I ever talk about the lazy encounter benchmark, every description you will see of it, the lazy encounter benchmark is on slyflourish.com. I'll link to it in the show notes below. I'll also link to a detailed analysis that I did. I never really published it, but it is available, where I compared the D&D 2024 encounter building guidelines to the lazy encounter benchmark. You'll find that in the show notes. My friend Teo Sabadia did a very similar circumstance, and I think some other people looked at it as well and did it. I know Scipio, who's here in chat, has a really good spreadsheet that talks about comparing all the encounter building guidelines and stuff like that. So the But the main thing with the encounter building guidelines is they are a loose guide. They are not a hardened limit. You should not be using those, in my opinion, as a budget. You can use it as a budget, kind of, but your own experience with your own characters are going to matter more than the benchmark will on paper. Depending on, there's so many variables. I describe this in the Tales of the Valiant version of this. I describe it in our Forge of Foes. I describe it in the Lazy DM's Companion. I describe it on my own website. Everywhere that I talk about the Lazy Encounter benchmark, I also include a whole section about how your mileage may vary. And your mileage is going to vary for a lot of different reasons. The circumstances of the encounter can change things a lot. The composition of the characters, the number of characters, the magic item those characters have, the skill level of your players, how many battles they've had before, are they coming in fresh? Or are they coming in pretty roughed up? There are so many different variables that are going to have a way bigger effect on that encounter benchmark than the benchmark can account for on its own, that you always want to squint when you're looking at it. It is a loose gauge, not a hard limit. The Lazy Encounter benchmark is a loose gauge, not a hard limit. That's the number one rule about the Lazy Encounter benchmark, is it is not meant to be. It is not absolute science. It is just getting you close. Its intention is to do two things. One, give you a rough gauge of the difficulty of a potential encounter that you already plan to run. And two, be easy enough to keep in your head that you can quickly do it without having to look up any tables and without having to look up at anything in a book. Those are the intentions. Make it easy to do and give you a rough gauge. Those are the two things that the Lazy Encounter benchmark do. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, the best thing you can do is subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, and you get a weekly newsletter that has RPG-related article, plus links to all of the other work that I do all over the web. You can also support me directly through Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, tools, a dedicated podcast, access to our Lazy DM community, all kinds of stuff you get for being a patron of Sly Flourish. And you can pick up any of my books, including Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, Lazy DM's Companion, Forge of Foes, City of Arches, and more at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Links for all of those are in the show notes. Please check them out. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.